welcome to Game 35, and I'm going to say it again. Welcome to Game Audio Hour number 34, because Google kind of messed me up and went live right in the middle of my statement. Google stepped on my line. It's our weekly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas, the latest techniques, project experiences, to audio secrets. Here's where you'll find your in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio. And the panel this week is enormous because we all want to talk to Noah Snyder, who I'm going to introduce at the end. I'm going to start with Vince. What's up, Vince?
Hi. Oh, man, not much, although I am remaining up courtesy of Soylent. That is my big upgrade for today. I've been on this weird nutritional slush for the last week. And I'm experimenting with what that will do to both my body and my mind. And so far, no ill effects, although maybe you guys can prove me wrong.
You know it's made of people, right?
Well, that's only Soylent Green. You know, before Soylent Green, there was the other two, what was it, Soylent Red and Soylent Blue, and those were just whatever. But this is Soylent, I guess it's Soylent White. We'll see. I think it's okay so far, but... Oh. If I collapse in the middle of the show, you know why.
I'll know why. Hey, Mike Shapiro, how you doing?
Doing rather well. I seem to have angered the internet connectivity gods, so I apologize in advance for any stuttering, technical, not my personal verbal deficiencies. I may end up sounding like that one CNN reporter who's halfway across the world and they stare blankly after every question and then nod in after a gap. So you've been forewarned. Other than that, I'm doing great, and it's great to be back.
I was going to say you and Noah seem to be like the same person, according to the internet. When you're logged in, Noah gets a little jittery, as you do, and then when you log out, Noah's perfectly clean. So there's some kind of Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson thing going on there.
We may be siphoning life force from one another.
Hey, and Weird Ian has been too long, buddy.
Oh, that's me. It's going well.
Yeah, you're the Ian this time.
Yes. No. Yeah, good to be back.
Getting past a cold.
Yeah, I think it's like a second wave PAX virus. That I missed the first volley, and then there was like the second string of viruses that incubated for an extra 2 weeks and then hit me. We're much better now.
Well, we can go get sick together at Indiecade. I'm excited to be going and seeing you there.
That's the main reason to go to these cons is the illnesses.
It's a forced vacation when you get back to work.
Right.
Gotta catch 'em all.
Speaking of con illnesses, hey Alex, how was Tokyo Game Show?
Actually, before I get into that, I'm feeling rather overwhelmed here by this Californian representation. There's like 5 of you. It's like only I'm balancing up the whole other side of the whole entirety of the rest of the world. So the weight is on my shoulders.
Well, if you would move here, it would be 6 from California.
Well, I think if I did that, I think the planet would just fall over, wouldn't it? There's got to be a balance.
You have a heavy pull on this that you're balancing us out.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I've just come back from Tokyo Game Show last night. Actually, just stepped off the Shinkansen, slept for a bit, and then here I am. And I did pick up this wonderful T-shirt.
That's awesome.
Yes. Represent.
It's very. It's much more subtle on the front.
For those who can't see, it says it's the PlayStation logo with a heart and then indies. So PlayStation loves indies.
It's not just a heart. It's a pixelated heart because
8-bit heart.
Yes.
It's a pixelated heart with a soft gradient in there?
Well, I mean...
That's cheating.
Both new and old.
It's the best of both worlds, isn't it?
Okay. I'll take that.
Well, let's get to our special guest. Noah Snyder, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here, guys.
That's great. So Noah comes to us by way of Mike Shapiro because you guys are old-time buddies.
Yes.
I appreciate you being on the show and letting us see this awesome studio. You've got a set of carpet and the hardwoods and the beautiful couch. Those listening are missing out on all that awesomeness.
The old-fashioned garage converts here.
Oh, I'm living in one of those as well. And look at this rack of gear. I mean, if this was a different show, I would just be saying, please tour us through all of your awesome gear.
And there's more down below, and
Oh,
they all have paid me for putting this particular gear on the show, though. So
yeah. Well, that'll help us get endorsements. Hey, Noah's using all this stuff. We'll just loop your show constantly for endorsements. Well, you know what? I mean, gosh, there's a lot to start with. I mean, if somebody, please, people, visit Noah's website, noahscottsnyder.com, NOAHSCOTSNYDER.com. If you go to the resume, you can just read for a very long time about all of the things that you've been involved in. My goodness, you know, Noah, I always do this when we interview people, but it's just so fascinating to me. Can you give us like a really quick, because I know it's probably you've been through it 1,000 times, and I apologize for asking you to do it again, but kind of like how you got started and how your career went in the direction it is, and leading up to all of these amazing things. All of these amazing.
Well, there's only two ways into Hollywood, as far as I know. One of them is nepotism. I didn't get that. That's the key way you get in. The other way is absolute happenstance, which was my route. I was living in San Francisco at the height of the .com era, and I had a job at Pets.com. Yes, I worked at Pets.com with the sock puppet, remember?
Oh, that commercial.
As I told them at a
What were you
meeting
doing there?
I said, you know, we have a commercial in the Super Bowl. We have a float in the Macy's Day Parade, but we can't get dog food to people's doors. They asked me never to speak again in a meeting.
Oh, wow.
So that's how that went. My brother lived in Los Angeles at the time, and he was friends with a guy at the gym, a guy named Steve Bartek, who was in Oingo Boingo, and he's Danny Elfman's orchestrator. And he said to my brother in the steam room one day, man, I could use some help, man. I just need an assistant so bad, and I don't know what to do. My brother said, hey, my brother's pretty good with computers. He's into music and stuff. You should give him a call. And that's how I got started.
That's like straight out of a movie.
That's awesome.
Right down to the steam room. That's amazing.
Was that your first big gig?
And Steve,
because I see.
yeah, I mean, I
Black
came in. My
there.
first film was Snow Day, which was a film with Chevy Chase that Steve Bartek composed, and my second film was Family Man, which was Danny composing. So I was in right there on the big scoring stage with big projects. I mean, at that point, I was handing out scores. Here's 3M1. You know, I mean, I did whatever I could to make myself useful, but that was my first film music gig.
Well, that's awesome. Did you ever feel the pressure, like, to catch up? Did you feel like everything was so far ahead of you that you had to really kind of run to try to figure it all out so quickly?
I mean, I think I feel that way about everything. I was 24, so it was like, you know, I was grateful to be there, but I don't think I really realized what the hell was going on, you know? And I was desperate to, I mean, it was exciting, and I was desperate to be involved, so I did whatever I could. At that point, I was good with guitars and computers, so I made myself useful in those two ways, you know?
That's fantastic. So you moved down, you spent your own money, came down to LA for this opportunity?
Yeah, yeah.
You really do have to do that.
1999.
That's fantastic. You know, it's a good lesson for a lot of the people that watch our show are new to the industry, and we're trying to help them, like, with experiences. And I know that for me, for one, I will get nervous when I think, oh, I should know this already, and I shouldn't be, like, chasing somebody's tail or doing a bunch of reading right before the project, you know. But the thing is, I've learned as I've gotten older is that projects are constantly different. You can't know everything, and so every project is some sort of catch-up. But I think some people think that I'll reach a pinnacle where I know everything. They wouldn't say they know everything, but I think people just assume that through all of their projects they'll end up collecting this knowledge that they'll eventually start having projects where they're kind of, there's no catch-up. But for me, it's always catch-up. So I was curious if it was the same for you.
Well, in certain ways it was, and in the beginning I was always really clear when somebody asked me to do so. Well, I've never done that before, but I feel I could do it. And as long as I was full disclosure, and I was lucky, very lucky, to be with get hooked up early with some people who believed in me, who gave me a shot, who wanted to see what I could do, you know. And I know now that I was misled, because most folks in Hollywood are not like that. They want to keep you in your spot, you know. So I got lucky. You know, I appreciate that there was some fortune involved.
So you were nice enough to fully disclose if there was something you weren't like terribly experienced with. That's unusual, because I tend to lie about that stuff.
Well, I learned to lie.
Yeah, I think that maybe there's a balance.
I think the word is not lie, Ian. The word is ad lib, I think.
I say
yes. Only among friends can I be this honest.
I say yes and hit YouTube, you know, on my phone. Yeah, I can do that. Hold on. Oh, man. So, you know, I don't want to... That was such a quick story. I can dig in on all my questions, but I also put in my notes that I wanted to give you and Mike a chance, you know, Mike, to say hi and to, you know, maybe give us a little history on how you guys know each other.
Well, I would actually suggest we segue to how we got involved in game audio, because Noah and I ran into each other probably fairly recently with respect to his whole careerscapes. So I would be interested in knowing like how he started working with Enon, how he started doing audio for games, and that exciting chapter of the story.
Perfect.
Right. Well,
question has been posed.
When I met Enon,
there's somebody at your door.
Oh, that was probably my 6-year-old. No, that's my wife. Hi, I'm live on the air. How you doing?
Oh, hi. Should I say hello?
Hello.
Hi.
It's my wife and my cat.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Hi.
Is that a chocolate point Siamese?
It's a Tonkinese.
Tonkinese.
Which is hard to tell from a Siamese, we determined after we...
That's awesome. I had a Javanese one.
Applehead, old-fashioned.
Hard to tell. Oh, what a beauty.
Bye.
Bye. Nice to see you.
Bye.
So, Enon. I met Enon. I'm not sure exactly how, but he was moving on from the mixer he was using for whatever reason that I never learned. And it was actually a strange, interesting call. I got a call from a friend of mine named Shai Razo, who's a terrific film editor, who knew Enon's assistant at the time. And they contacted me, said, how would you like to mix this cue for us by way of audition? And I'll be honest with you, no one's asked me that before or since. And I was pretty dubious about the idea. Oh, yeah, sure, I'll mix it for you. Then you'll decide if you like it. And I'm sure you'll tell me and pay me after you use it in the game.
Same concerns everybody has, huh?
But I said, so I went for it. He was concerned about finding someone who he felt had legit orchestral recording and mixing skills. And evidently I demonstrated that, or fooled him, or whatever I did. And I've been there. I think I've mixed every orchestral recording he's had since then.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he does plenty of stuff that I'm not involved when budget doesn't allow, which, you know, is probably something we'll talk about at some point. I know you guys have been on that subject before on the podcast. But I'm very fortunate and he's very fortunate that he's in a position that he does get to do a lot of live orchestras. In fact, today, on the 28th, he's at Abbey Road recording.
Oh, wow.
And on the 1st, we're in Los Angeles mixing.
Nice, nice. So what was the first game then?
Woo! I think it was Dragon Age, which is also getting in on the... I'm pretty sure that's what it was, and it was also recorded... it was not recorded by me. Can't remember for sure if it was recorded in London or here in the States, to be honest with you. But we quickly did a bunch. We did Lord of the Rings, War in the North. We did Second Dragon Age. We did a cryptically titled game called Blue Hole. We did Rift. We did. This year we did Fantasia video game, which is yet to come out, which is a big time thing. Amazing project. It's all about music.
That's awesome. And so is your role then is to just do mixes? Or are you participating in any of the recording or the sessions?
I have recorded for him. Oftentimes I'm not able to. When they go to Abbey Road, they have one of the incredible Abbey Road engineers do it. And you may be shocked to learn they do a very good job. So I know all those cats. I've been over there before, and I've met most of them face to face. They're wonderful guys, and I mean honestly, Abbey Road that's where it's at, man. It doesn't get better than that, you know.
That's amazing. Well, you're really cutting out a niche of doing mixing and mastering. You know, we've had that discussion on the show before. Like, it's been as recently posed as last episode, where should people look out for a different person to do the mastering than themselves? Because in games we do so much in the box and we do it ourselves. Yeah. I'm a proponent of doing that because of pro audio. I've gotten the habit of doing that. Mm-hmm. I think. What is your take on having a different ear do the mix and do the mastering?
Well, I mean, I did some records back in the day, and that was how it was done. It was important to have a separate mastering engineer, you know. But I think that the process is streamlined so much that there are plenty of times when that's not really important. I feel like I'm handing it off to someone who's going to do a good job mastering it, then I'm happy to let them master it. If I'm handing it off to someone who I'm concerned may not be up to the challenge, then I'll do it. We'll do it ourselves, and sometimes we'll deliver both. Honestly, we'll deliver just the unmastered mixes and the mastered mixes, and tell them, hey, you know, if you can beat this, go for it. And if you can't, then we've done something for you already. You know. Is there
any kind of quality that you look for that you could describe, like a punchier high ends or a flatter mix in the mids? Is there any kind of quality you shoot for when you're mixing? And not to give away your secrets, because we all mix in different ways, but is there a thought process you go through when you're A, mixing yourself, and B, when you're evaluating somebody else's mix to see if you're going to go with them?
Right. Well, this segues nicely into some things that you guys were talking about and that I wanted to talk about. And to me, the music job, or even you're just listening to a single, like something. Now, it can make you want to feel sad or happy or shake your butt or heroic or adventurous or whatever it is in your game, but it should feel like something. So, and that's kind of a record idea, and it's also, I understand, a little bit of kind of BS in the sense, you know, it's like, I want the mix to be more orange, more like sunset in the desert. But what I mean is it should have an emotional value. It should do something to the listener so that they relate to it in some way. And in a movie with picture, or a game with picture, it's pretty self-evident how it should feel. If this thing that's happening on screen is about kicking some butt, it should feel like it's kicking some butt, you know? And if it's romance, then it should feel romantic. But to me, that's what's most important. And to get to one thing I want to mention about live, I know you guys have talked about live performance, and the client, Enon, who gets to record a live orchestra often has to deal with often doesn't get to record a live orchestra. And live musicians really make it a lot easier to put some feeling in there. And things that, like, you know, there's a reason you get a tear in your eye at the end of the kind of crappy rom-com that was garbage throughout the whole movie. And it's not because Ashton Kutcher is a gifted actor. Because it tells you how to feel. And most of the people doing it, a lot of the people doing it, are gifted enough that they can make you feel that. And so I think there's a lot of value in having live musicians. And when you can't have live musicians, that you should strive for that value of it having an emotional quotient. So to me, that's kind of the most important thing. Now, I'll tell you what I think is the number one mistake people make with or anything they're delivering. It's this horrible thing they invented called the digital limiter. And I'm sure you're all familiar.
Oh.
Oh. Here's my problem with limiting. And look, we all got a limit. We live in the world where things are loud when they're quiet. I get it. It's cool. I mean, it makes it louder, you know? But when a piece of music doesn't have... Why a real orchestra immediately jumps off the page as being real and having emotion, a lot of it is the dynamic. A real orchestra goes from so quiet to so loud, it's way bigger dynamic range than you're probably going to want to end up with. But it feels very real. And people, here's what I see most often. Oh, there's a lot of sound in this scene, they're fighting, and there's swords hitting metal, and shields, and it clink, 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 clink. So I'm going to limit the bejesus out of this mix so it can cut through. What actually happens is that it doesn't cut through. Dynamic, where things can come out of the sound, and a boom, 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 a big drum fill reaches out of the texture of all this sound and reaches you, it all becomes one volume. And it gets turned down and it becomes wallpaper. And it doesn't have impact. It no longer has any emotional value, it has no dynamic, and it ends up being sounding like I say, 100 tracks that add up to a shaker. And that's the whole thing. And you just, and I understand why people are, why their kind of knee-jerk reaction is to pump it up more and to pump it up more and to limit harder and to limit harder. But I think that oftentimes it's a counter purposes, especially if you listen to that same piece of audio at the same apparent volume. Not the same volume setting on your knob, but where it sounds the same. Because when it gets dubbed into the game, it's going to be at some volume, right? And like I said, reach out of that texture of noise and reach out and do something and then back off and then find a space to come out. And like my hand did there, woo! You know, then it's going to have...
Nice.
It's going to have more impact. It's going to mean more. When you hear it, it'll do something instead of just turning into, like I said, wallpaper. So that's I think, the most critical issue at mastering. And you know, the Europeans are already ahead of us on this, and they've set a kind called LUFS value. Any piece of music.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I interrupted. I was going to ask you how important LUFS is to your process.
Well, it's valuable tool, especially if your ear's not, you know, tuned into it. You know, so if you got the Red Hot Chili Peppers mix from 2008 and it's got a LUFS value of -1 on iTunes Radio, they're going to turn it down 15 dB. And your thing is going to sound stale. So I think it's valuable because it makes people take account of that dynamic and how important it is to preserving a good listening experience and really, like I said, preserving an emotional value to the music. And like I said, emotional can be shake your butt. It just something that's real, something that makes you feel something, you know. And that's what I think all music ultimately should do.
No, I have a question. We of course all know about the loudness war in the recording industry, and you know, the various battles that have been fought and the victories and losses that have been that have been experienced. But in terms of mobile gaming, where do you see the next 5 years of game audio development moving for mobile gaming, where, of course, the loudness war has a much more practical implication because people are listening on trains, or people are listening in the subway or outside, or basically in environments where dynamic range becomes very, very limiting from an auditory sense. Where do you see the next 5 years going? Do you think that we're just going to get all squashed for casual mobile gaming, or is there going to be some renaissance of dynamic range where people are going to realize that to get a proper audio experience you have to go into a quiet room? Or what do you think?
Well, I think that's a good question, and I think that ultimately you always have to be considering what your playback environment's going to be. So when I mix a film, I know it's going to be a film theater. Film theater is a quiet place that speakers are set up in a certain way so you can be immensely dynamic. When I mix a CD, I understand that there's another dynamic range. When I'm mixing a game, there's also what I think of as a TV dynamic range. When I mix games, for consoles. I think that obviously if you're mixing a game music or any audio for a mobile device, you're going to have to take that into account, and it's going to be a smaller dynamic range. But you also want to take into account that, like Vincent is now, or you are there, that you might be on headphones, and so headphones have a wider dynamic range, and you want the music to hold up and the audio to hold up in that scenario. So you're going to have to, check it out, see how it sounds, make sure it's happening on just the speaker of the mobile device, but also see if you can push the limits a little bit and make it so it's a little more dynamic, so that if it were listened to on headphones or played in someone's, if they want to play it on their home computer and they've got a nice set of speakers set up, that it doesn't become audio assault on them of ultra limited audio that's fatiguing on your ears. I mean, you won't want to listen. You'll turn it down. It's rough on you. And so if you want it to be valuable to the listener, you're gonna have to balance all those things. And because it's a new burgeoning, because more things are moving on to there, people are going to have to figure it out. They're going to make some mistakes. They're going to push the limits. There'll be some good ones, some bad ones, and hopefully they'll settle into something that works across mobile devices, and across for that.
Yeah, I was working on a game that we're working, and I was listening to the mix that I'd done on the iPad, and I had the headphones, and I had the iPad speaker, and then I got this Android Samsung something or other. You guys seen this one? I don't know what it's called. The Samsung. Oh wait, because it's probably important for the show. I don't know. It's a Samsung something. But what's cool is they got these stereo speakers right here on the screen. There's like these tiny little stereo speakers over there. So my mix sounded good on headphones, crap on the iPad, and then actually kind of decent on the Samsung. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to be able to create a soundtrack that is like awesome in all of those areas. I'm going to have to choose.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna. What would your decision? Give me a hint, man. Help me out, dude. Help me out.
Well, here's another cryptic thing I say to mix. People may appreciate us get pissed off by this, but a good mix, when you listen to it on a bad system, it should reveal the limits of the bad system, not the limits of your mix. So.
Oh, that's a good point.
So if this system is deficient in this way, the iPad sounds bad because it has bad imaging, or it has no ability to reproduce low end, or everything sounds squashed, then guess what? The best mix in the world is going to sound that way through an iPad, So you probably want to be somewhere where of those things, and that when it comes up through those speakers, whatever playback system it is, you're like, oh yeah, that's pretty much what it's going to sound like on that.
Reminds me a bit of Game Boy Advance.
How do you get the producers on board? How do you say, okay, because I got to be honest. Oftentimes you turn in something, the producer listens to it, and they go, you know, it doesn't sound good on an iPad. And we're putting this game on an iPad and iPhone. And if I look at them and I say, well, it's because you're using less than awesome audio devices to put your game out, tell your people to put headphones on, they're going to go, listen, man, just make it sound good. That's what you do. So what's your combatant for that?
Well, that's a tough spot. I mean, you know, we're all working for somebody who's cutting us a check, and you got to make them happy, you know. So I get that, and actually gets to something else that I saw on the podcast before that I wanted to touch on briefly, which was the lowering the bar thing, about what happens when it's so easy to make me. I don't think there's a lot of particular danger in lowering the bar on that side. Where I get scared is when the people evaluating the stuff have the bar lowered, when they don't know how to evaluate whether it's good or bad. That's when you're in a dangerous spot. When they don't value good audio, when they don't value something that sounds good, or just can't tell the difference, that's a dangerous place to be in, because you got to make these people happy. So, you know, you start from what you think is best, what you trust. You have to trust yourself, you know, trust your own ears, and address their needs as best you can. And, you know, sometimes you got to go back and forth a couple times, and you try to tell them things like I just told you about loudness and limiting, and saying, you know, I don't think it's going to have the effect that you want it to have. You know, what I want for your music is for it to, you know, to drive the game, to make it exciting, to make it adventurous or heroic or whatever. And I think you'll be best served if the music's like this. They could tell you you're wrong, in which case you'll change it, and maybe they won't hire you again. But you gotta do. You don't want to be in a position where you're delivering something you don't believe in. It's a bad place to be.
And we've preached on the show before that you can't be for fear of your job, or you won't deliver your best work. I think you're saying the same thing. It's just, you know, give the reasons why you're going in this direction and what you think is best, and present it to them. And like you said, they may not hire you again, but obviously you do have to make the changes that they put in place. But at least you tried from the beginning without a fear for losing the gig, to do the right thing with the sound. Absolutely. Hey guys, you got any questions? I want to peruse the chat room really quickly, because I'm seeing all kinds of stuff to ask Noah, but if somebody can take over for me really quickly, I'll look them over.
I have a quick question. So about like, this is something you feel very strongly about, obviously. So say you're working on a game, and one of the things about working on a game is that no matter what you turn in, you're still handing off the assets to people to implement the stuff, and they're going to use it as they will. You know, they can apply whatever they want, they can mix it however they want. How much do you like try and stay, you know, kind of supervising that process to make sure that it's used in such a way that it doesn't butcher your work?
Right. I mean, in almost every, at least every sound for picture thing you're going to do, at some point you're going to hand it off, you know, and you know, I could spend all day making a film score sound the way I wanted to. At some point, they're going to dub it into the movie, and they're going to put dialogue and sound effects in there, and it's going to be out of my hands, you know. And they've hired someone else to make those evaluations. So I've got to hope that I could trust those people. And like I said, I think expressing yourself, if you have concerns, expressing yourself in a way that what you're trying to do. You know, hey, I want this because I think that this is what would benefit your game. You know, I think I have, in my experience and my expertise, if you do these, if you implement it in this way, this will help your game. And then they can understand why it is you're saying it. You're not saying it because, oh, this is also precious to me. I can't let it go. This is I don't want you to tromp on it because you don't know what you're doing. All the things that we think we hear when someone says something to us. So, you try to be careful about explaining what it is that you hope for and how that, if you're interested in benefiting them, that's what you're interested in. And most people will respond positively to that. But, at some point you got to let it go, and it's going to go in the game, and it's going to be what it's going to be, and unless you want to get into that end of being the one who puts all the final sound, to get to come to terms with the fact that you're handing it off, and somebody's going to do that,
One question that I'm sure a lot of people who are only have experience in game audio and would probably be interested to ask is, how does doing game audio, in your experience, differ from doing film audio, and what are the unique challenges associated with both? And an extension of that is, which do you enjoy more?
I was going to ask something similar.
Well, I'll tell you what. The first time I mixed a game, it was very much from the film world at that point. As I said, I'd done some records, but the thing that was amazing to me was, in film work, your timeline, it's all determined by somebody else. When the music's going to change, it's determined by the picture editor. So you're chasing an edit, and all the timing of everything has been predetermined for you. So you got to try to make music within the framework of the tempos and cutting and sequencing that they've already done. The first time I mixed a game for Anon, I was like, wow, we're just mixing music. There's no 5/4 bar in the middle of a bunch of 4/4 bars. There's no, the only reason anything ever speeds up or slows down is because the music wants it to. What an incredible idea, Mm-hmm. So that I think is awesome, and that's makes it exciting because I feel like I can be focused fully on the music and the vibe, meaning whatever it is our scene is. We don't know exactly how it's going to play out. It's going to play out thousands of different ways when different people play the game, and you're not sure where the French horn entrance is going to be. It might be right when he picks up his sword. It might be, as he slashes for the third time. You don't know. So there's a freedom in that, and that is wonderful because it lets you focus on, like I said, I think the emotional value. In film work, this is what I say about sound for picture. It ain't about your sound. It's about their picture. It's film. It's always to serve the film. And a brilliant piece of music might be great on its own, but just a darn problem for the scene. It needs to be less. It needs to get out of the way, So you have to be responsible to and responsive to that. When I mix films, I listen to the dialogue with it a bunch of times, because I have to know where the dialogue is, because if I don't pay attention to it, someone later on is going to just yank it down. They're going to take it down because the dialogue needs to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
So they both present unique opportunities, Like I said, film work is great because of the dynamics. You can do stuff in film that you can really film audio that you can't do anywhere else, because people are going to hear it in the theater, and what theater speakers are like, and they're full range in the front, and there's a subwoofer, so you can have something that's barely there with the crickety scene, and then when the zombie pops out, you can make it so freaking loud everyone's going to jump out of their seats, and that's also really exciting. It really helps the thing do something, have impact. Just the very basic sense of going from to kaboom makes the audience feel it. That's something important. That's valuable. Yeah,
absolutely.
So which do I prefer? I feel lucky anytime, like with Inan, who's a brilliant composer. He's a brilliant guy. He understands what he's doing in terms of how to make music, how to make it serve the game, how to make his clients happy. If I'm working on good music with a good guy who's good at their craft, I'm happy. It doesn't get much better than that,
That's awesome.
So to say that working on some film is better than working with Inan or working with Elfman, I don't feel that way. I feel very lucky, very, very lucky to be able to work with guys as good as that.
I've got a question for you, and that's awesome, man. Your resume is amazing, and the people you've gotten to work with. And this is the question, the crux of my question. I was going to ask, working with a guy like Inan and with Danny Elfman, how much do they play with the mix themselves before you get involved, or edit the mix as you deliver it to them, to kind of meet their ear or anything like that? Or do they trust you just outright because they've got a limited amount of time to get this thing done and they've already evaluated you and that's why they've chosen you and they want to move forward? Or do they really kind of dig in pretty deeply? Is it different for each one?
I mean, every composer and artist I've worked with is relates to it in a different way. When I worked on Warren Zevon on his last record, he told me, I don't want to talk to you about the mixes because all I'm going to tell you to do is turn up the last thing we recorded. Danny is a guy who likes to put his leaders, and so that's an important part of it for him, and it's part of his writing process, his compositional process, is mixing, is playing with it some, and oftentimes that means pulling things out, putting them back in, taking them out here, trying that, or hey, I want you to reverse the perspective on these things. This thing is distant and this thing's close, but I want it to be the opposite. So Inan is he's very hands-on in his mixes too. He knows what he wants. The other thing is the demoing.
Oh.
So these guys have already delivered demos to the people cutting the checks, and the people cutting the checks have said, I like that one. That's good. Version 3, that's a winner. So we've got to be observant of that. We can make it better, but we can't ignore what the thing was. Work within certain contexts and understand, if there was something about it here they really liked, the drums are in charge in this section. We gotta probably keep the drums in charge in that section, So partially for me, I try to listen to the demos, but the composer has an intimate knowledge of the composition that I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And they know the hidden secrets, the things that, this thing has always been very important. And so I like to be engaged in that with them. When I first started out, it was hard. You'd present a mix and the person have 3,000 notes and you'd think, man, I did a bad job. But I learned to do this. Be done with the mix, and I'd say, how can we make this mix better?
Nice. That's a good tip.
So precious about it, like it couldn't possibly be improved upon. After all, I did it.
I hear you.
I guess a game audio hour wouldn't be complete.
But it's a nice thing. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say a game audio hour wouldn't be complete if we didn't actually talk a little bit of shop, a bit of tech. I'm sure there are a number of people out there who are wondering what you use and how to get that Noah Snyder sound.
You beat me to the punch, man. Absolutely. That's my question is what's in your rig? What are you using for DAW? What are you using for hands-on mixing?
Well, I mean, I'm a pretty hardcore Pro Tools guy. And since I am most often involved with, live music, I love it as a recorder. And now in its newest iterations, I really, really, really love it as a mixer too. The thing about that is that, I honestly think it sounds as good as you can get now. But workflow is what it's all about. You know, we're all on a time constraint. So, you know, when I work with the oftentimes and Cubase, which is what he uses to do his sequencing. So we won't have time necessarily to turn everything into audio, bring it into Pro Tools, have me rebuild the mix from nothing. We'll record into Pro Tools, or will be delivered from Abbey Road, a recording of orchestra, and we'll sync it with his Cubase sequence and mix them together, and use a lot of what he's already created in his demo mix. We'll turn off the stuff that we replaced, and then we'll get in there and start saying, okay, well, you know, now we need to adjust the reverb, too much reverb on this to match with the orchestra, or we need to, it's taking up too much space, we're going to equalize this, remove some low end, add some, do this or that or the other thing. But it's mostly about workflow. So, and they all do the same stuff now. I mean, I used to be a performer guy, and the digital performer, Cubase, Logic, Pro Tools, they all operate and achieve such similar. I think that what makes you happy is the best thing. What makes you work most efficiently and quickly, get the results you want, so you're not caught in endless drop-down menus and tweaking plugins you don't understand. Then that's going to be what's best for you. You know, we've used the Pro Tools mix engine. We've used the Cubase mix engine. You know, they're all really good now. I mean, compared to where they were 10 years ago,
oh yeah,
it's astonishing what you can do in the box for $800 worth of software.
That's true. But in the end, you go to, like, if you get something from the LSO, then it's probably going to be in Pro Tools, right? And so you have Pro Tools on your end, so you just put it. It's easier to transfer, no raw files, no dealing with all that. That's good advice, man. That's really good.
But Enon will often record at his place a soloist. He'll record it right into Cubase, and so sync to Cubase. The LSO on Pro Tools. We'll have some musician on Cubase. We'll have a bunch of sequencers in soft synths living in Cubase and also in Vienna Ensemble on another computer, and it'll all be synced together, just rocking and rolling together. You know, I mean, that's the other thing that's beautiful about all this technology is, and one of the first things that I was most amazed about on the scoring stage was, holy goodness, there's about 8 billion machines here, all completely locked in sync, you know, with tolerances of timing that are minute.
Yeah. You know, that's an episode we need to do, is about setting up all that timing situations between your external hardware and your computer. Everything here is timed up, but it's such a pain in the neck. It's like you got to know your audio flow, you've got to know your MIDI flow, and now you got to know your time code flow. It's such a nightmare. It's like people get to the point of time code and they just go, I'm exhausted. I'm done figuring this stuff out.
The thing is, if you're on a digital console, you got the same problem. $1 million, I won't say names, but $1 million digital console, and you still got to timeline everything, you know. So that's, you know, if you're going to sync a bunch of stuff together, that's the price.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? Hey guys, Mike, Vince, you guys got any questions out there? I've seen you both speaking up, but then I jump on your line. I'm so sorry.
No problem. Kind of keeping on going that, you mentioned the console. Like, how often do you work with faders and knobs, and how often are you working with a mouse or a trackball and fiddling with things on the screen? And what's your preference there? Or do you actually happily jump between both situations depending on what you're working with?
Mm-hmm. Well, I do have you know, some faders and knobs here, a little thing right in front of me.
What are you using?
It's an Avid Artist mix, and I dig it. It works great for me. But I'll be honest, the vast majority of what I do is with the mouse. What I do is, and keyboard shortcuts, and you know, if I want to tweak plugins or panning, I never use the knobs. The faders are the only thing I really use, and that's for, you know, kind of riding when I want to ride multiple things at the same time, this against that. You can't do that with the mouse. You can only click on one fader, you know. But it's, I could get along with just a mouse. I could totally get along with just a mouse. I love this artist mix, and it's valuable to me, and definitely there are times, like I said, with certain clients, Danny needs to have faders. I can't do it without faders, you know. So there are things where it's very valuable and it saves me time, but you know, my way into all this was that I got in right at the minute that everybody was changing to digital-based recording from analog-based recording, or digital tape, non-linear recording. And so I was really stage within 4 years. Everyone had moved to recording everything to a DAW. And so no one had any advantage on me.
Sorry. You know, a very important question, though, since you got involved in 1999, did you party like it was 1999?
Only on that one night, December 31st, 1999. Actually, my wife was there. It was at my parents' house.
That's awesome. I'm sorry for the stupid questions. I'm full of them. Hey, so I hate that we're running out of time. We try to keep our show to an hour, but we certainly go over. But I want to ask this question before I forget, because I know the other guys have got questions. And this is a very hard question to answer. But if you were to give, like, 3 points for people who are working on their mixes, and I know you've already given some answers, but if you were to succinctly say, these are the 3 things you're going to want to think about when you're doing mixes for games, is there any kind of advice you would have in that area?
I do. Let me think. Well, one time I was this is a fancy story. Bob Thornton's house, hanging out, and Daniel Lanois was there because Warren Zevon was friends with Billy Bob, and I wanted to pick this guy's brain real bad.
You're blowing me away.
And
one of my favorites.
He told me a good mix should be like a good photograph. There should be things that are in focus, things that are out of focus, things that are close, things that are far away. So it's about contrast. If you make everything the same, it's kind of like the dynamic thing. If everything's the same, it's not, there's going to be no texture, there's going to be no point of comparison. Audio, everything within a mix only exists relative to the things within that mix. So if you want something to be slathered in reverb, well, give me an idea of what it sounds like for something to be present, to be dry, you know? You want something to be crisp and detailed, then give me an idea of what it's like for something to be fuzzy and mega distorted. Give me an idea of what it's like clean, you know? Give me contrast in that mix, and that's going to make an interesting mix. So says someone much smarter than me, so who might argue?
I've got a question about making album soundtrack mixes of audio for games. You mentioned the overuse of digital limiters, kind of crunching down the dynamic range. Do you get to remix the music for an album, and does that allow you to make, you know, kind of free of the mix of the game? Does that let you give the mix you've wanted to give of the music when you do that?
Well, that's a great question. I think that in my mind, I kind of conceive of the TV. Again, most of the games I'm mixing are for console, so I conceive of the TV dynamic range to be really similar to the CD dynamic range, because that's kind of an equivalent system that people are likely to be listening on. And again, if we're delivering it to someone who I think is going to have a good mastering engineer who's going to then, and I'll trust them. And there's definitely been times where I've happily done that and gotten good results. If I think they're just going to slap it together, then I'll want to master it. And you know, I would prefer to under limit than over limit. You know, what happens when you underlimit? It means that someone will have to turn up the volume on their CD playback device. That's not the worst thing to happen, you know, provided it's not so quiet that you can't hear it at full volume, which you're unlikely to make that mistake. I think that's it's better to be on that side. So I think that for games, for console games, I think pretty similarly, I approach it pretty similarly as I do to a CD, because CDs are often listened to on laptops and on, you know, less than ideal environments, cars, and even, you know, a lot of people now their TV or setup into a console, and literally coming out the same speakers, you know. So for a lot of people, that is the best playback device they have, is whatever their console thing is hooked up to. So I think in most cases I approach that basically to be kind of one thing.
So if we were to listen to the Dragon Age soundtrack album, you know, get it from iTunes or whatever, and play through a good sound system, are we just hearing the music scraped out of the game, or have you had some chance to remix it or remaster it?
Great question.
That's a good question. I think that because of because of where Inan and Mai's relationship was at that point, Inan and mine, something English phrase that makes sense. It's taken me time to convince him, and now he, you know, believes in me about when to go heavy, when to go light, when to let them do it. You know, at that point he was in a mode, delivered everything with a pretty decent amount of limiting on there, and I would expect what's in the game is what's on the CD. For Fantasia, which is about to come out, that's Disney. You know, they've got their own mastering engineers that do records all day. You know, and I didn't bother limiting it. It's the LSO. It sounds amazing. I don't, you know, so. They did both the game mastering and the CD mastering. In other cases, like I said, we've delivered lightly and then unmastered stuff for the CD. But you know, the thing I would caution is, you know, grabbing an L2 and pulling it down 8 dB. That's not mastering. That's limiting the bejesus out of your mix. You know, mastering is about comparing it to other things and understanding how it's going to exist in the world as it gets out there. It's not just about, whoa, sitting at my desk where I write, man, it really bangs my head off when I pull this lever all the way down to, you know, like in The Princess Bride. Oh, he took 30 years off his life, you know. That's what it feels like to me.
Oh man, that's awesome. So there's a question out in the chat room I didn't want to miss. Matt M was asking. Let me find it here really quickly. I guess. Shoot, it got away from me. Did you guys see it out here about frequency adjustments so that they could give more headroom?
Yeah, I've got it. Actually, he's got two questions.
Would filtering low and even high-end frequencies extend the headroom of mobile audio?
That's a great question, and I would say Matt M is thinking down the right path. There's no question of the little itty. There's physics involved. You know, that little itty bitty speaker, it has limitations.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's not going to be able to, you know, it ain't going to produce 8 hertz. It probably ain't going to produce 30 hertz. Probably going to have a hard time reproducing 60 hertz. So if you got a lot of information in your file that's in a range that it's not going to be able to reproduce, well, that's going to lower the overall fidelity of your thing. And I'm not going to say that I'm an expert on specific for mobile device games, but I would say that that's a good path to head down in terms of experimenting with that. And you know, MP3s ruthlessly. You know how much time you want to spend on something, it's not going to be heard by nobody. You know, so I would think that toying with that idea and figuring out where it makes a difference, where you start to lose important information, is definitely worth doing, because you will likely find that if you get rid of that extraneous information and all of your 16 bits or 24 bits or whatever, how many bits you got are used actually only for the sound that you can reproduce, you're going to have a higher fidelity product.
That's a good idea. He has another question. He said, do you usually mix to stems for a game or to stereo/surround?
It's basically stereo still in games, in my experience.
Okay.
Even on Fantasia, it was stereo. And just like that, very frequently they want stems. Very frequently they want stems. We get that. We also get, as you guys are probably well familiar with, layers of stuff. So it's the same piece of music, but it's like we mix it three times.
Yeah.
One time it's like a small section with light drums. Then we do another version that's bigger section, more drums, and then the crazy, blow your mind version where it's the LSO playing on top of themselves 3 times and every drum known to humankind available on a soft synth, and so that then they can have the same piece of music and edit between it as they need to different intensity levels. But still often they'll want big drums, little drums. They'll want at whatever separation we can give them, and most often, even though you feel like you're giving up control, if those people are good at what they're doing, that's going to benefit you, because that means that if it's just the high percussion, you got some middles they have, then they don't have to pull back your whole musical package. They don't have to pull back the whole cue. They can just pull back the metal, and your music will live better. It'll be more what you want it to be, more of your original vision of what that music would be, living better in the game. High-pitched, we've run into this, Jan does a lot of games that involve metal, hitting metal. And that's something we think about often, about where might we be competing with existing sound. And we want to give them the ability to adjust our mix without totally just taking the music out.
Gotcha. We got another question that just came in from Brian DiDomenico, who is in the car watching the show. So that means he is typing this message while trying to kill people on the highway.
There's laws against that, I'm pretty sure.
He said, Noah, when you are delivering music for games that you will be mastering, are you delivering mastered files as Enon composes, or do you wait until the whole soundtrack is done to send mastered versions?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, ideally, I'd love to master everything at the end so I can do it as one thing, and that's, I'm sure, kind of what he's getting at, because then what's the quietest thing, what's the loudest thing. Here's something, this should be the same amount of loud as this thing later on. And if I can get that opportunity, I do that. Oftentimes, due to requirements of delivery, you don't have that luxury. You've got to deliver today. We need stuff Monday night, Tuesday night, and Wednesday night, So you deliver at the end of the day what you got. So you got to do your best, and over time, you develop experience and the ability to kind of know what loud is, what quiet is. I'll tell you one thing that's a big secret, big help you big time. Always listen at the same volume.
Yeah.
Then you'll really know. Then when you start the first piece of music on a new project, you'll know what loud is, because it's ingrained in your brain. You know exactly what loud is. When your knob is set to this, loud is this loud. And immediately, oh, this thing isn't loud enough, or this thing is way too loud, and riding your volume knob up and down all day will create problems for you.
Yeah, did you tune your setup to a specific place on your volume knob? I set my volume to 12 o'clock, and then I tuned that volume-wise through my outboard gear to make sure that I've got that leveled sum for everything. So so exactly what you're talking about. Did you do the same thing where you can set a spot and you know that meets the loudness that you're expecting to deliver?
Yeah, well, since my primary delivery, the main thing I work on is films, I know exactly how loud she's expecting me to be done by now.
No problem. Take your time.
I know exactly. Theater level is 85 dB. That's what it is. So I've got a Grace MO6 surround controller over here. When this says 85, I'm at 85.
Dude, that is badass.
So it's valuable to know. I'll tell you, I don't listen at theater volume very often. Most of the time, I'm mixing at 70 or 75, depending on what studio I'm in. If I'm in a near field environment or a far field environment. At near field, I tend to do 70. In far field, I tend to do 75. But and then I'll do a playback at 85 and hurt my ears because I'm required to know what it's going to sound like at the theater. But so I'm called here, 85. I'm called. My Pro Tools rig's called to -18 dB. So if I put in a signal generator at -18, that's coming out of my speaker at 85. Each of these 5 speakers and the sub will all be coming out at 85 with me seated in my listening spot.
Yeah, and I can't say how important that is. A lot of people don't know that, though. In the game industry, they don't understand that whole summing of leveling your sum. Sum leveling. What do they call that? Can't think of the term. But can you send me the link for that piece of equipment you just showed me? I'd never seen that. When the
oh man, Grace Design. Yeah, I love them.
Yes, I probably have seen it because I do drool over their things when I see them in my magazines. When I got that thing, I actually wrote them an unsolicited email just to tell them, I am staggered by the sound quality in my studio. It's got its own DAs in there, so I feed it digitally, and I can switch. Right now I'm listening through it. See, it's on computer now. Oh, wow.
5.1 monitoring, 2-track. Literally just listening to my iTunes was like, instead of coming out of the DA in my and feeding some amp, this the DA in here's handling it, and it was like, oh, all of a sudden I'm hearing chair squeaks on a Prince song that I swear to God he didn't hear. I swear to God he never heard it. Sometimes it snows in April. Go ahead and check it out. The chair squeaks. He's playing the acoustic guitar. It's quiet, and the chair squeaks.
What song is that?
Oh man.
I have to say though that I'm extremely jealous because I'm using a Coleman Audio for my adjustments, and I have to get out a little eyeglasses screwdriver and go in there and twist the. I love Coleman Audio, but I think Grace has really smacked him in the face when it comes to how easy it is to work with their equipment.
In fairness, it's a slightly different price point. I looked at the Coleman surround monitor when I bought this thing, and eventually, obviously, I chose this other thing. But it was a cost-benefit analysis because I probably could have bought 3 of the other ones for the price. Yeah,
the Coleman I think cost me $1,700, and I know that yours wasn't that.
That sounds about right. I was going to say $2,000. This thing's more like $6,000. So.
Yeah, but it's worth it. That's pretty awesome. Well, guys, let's let Noah have his night. Any last questions? Nothing yet, huh? Nothing comes to mind, Mike?
Much that nobody's got.
Actually, no. Oh, you alluded to this a little earlier with European broadcast standards and LUFS, and obviously it's not just a suggestion. It's a requirement for broadcast media over there to be at certain levels. And so you got your loudness analyzer on. You're like, okay, if you're doing a song, if you're doing a TV commercial, you've got to hit those levels. Otherwise, it's going to be changed on the broadcaster's part in order to accommodate that. But of course, for games, whether it be the big game console or the your mobile devices, you don't have to worry about that. But do you worry about that? Are you similarly stringent when you're working on a game, so you have that consistency, or do you sometimes play a little lax if someone tells you, oh, make this louder,
Well, again, I as I sort of alluded to in the beginning, I try to convince them, that I'm doing the right amount of limiting that serves their game, and if I think that it's going to be better served by being able to have a dynamic range where things come out and go back in, and then I'll try to keep it as wide as I can, but as I said, I think that a lot of the times over limiting is going to not serve it very well, and so I try to balance it to what the scene is. When we do cinematics, in between things, so where there's going to be, literally, it's going to be like a film in the game. There's the part where they tell you a little story and you're not in control. Well, then I'm going to mix that one differently than the huge boss fight. The boss fight's going to have to cut through a lot of stuff. And so I'll understand. I can't get that quiet on the boss fight. But the welcome to this village piece of music, well, that can be more dynamic, because in the welcome to the village piece of music, you're walking around the village and you're exploring the shops and you're meeting the new character and clanking. I really think you want to try to serve the game, serve the thing, do what's right for what's happening overall in the overall experience of what this game is, and not just get caught in the trap of, well, it sounded really good sitting at my desk. And I also want to point out that even our Do Nothing Congress put limits on how loud that damn commercial can be relative to the late night television program that you're trying to kind of go to sleep to, and Ed's TV-O-Rama has been limited so heavily that it's like scaring the neighbors next door. Even our Do Nothing Congress took care of
that. Well, they're done for the year.
Oh, they deserve it. I'm also.
They need a raise and a break. Oh, that's funny. Well, hey guys, I'm going to wrap it up here then. Anybody, last minute, last chance you've got. Ooh. All right. Well, Noah, it was great having you on the show. We could go on for hours.
I thank you guys so much. It
was such great information. I mean, you've given us so much to chew on. Please, if I'm going to, when I edit the video, I include all the links to things as well. When you look through the description of the video, if there's anything I missed, please let me know, because so much transpired, and I tried to write everything down, but I know I missed a couple of things. I'll hopefully get it out of my memory, but please let me know. And thank you again, Mike, for arranging this whole thing. It was just amazing meeting Noah and having all of this awesome information.
I was happy to do it. I'm glad he was able to join us.
All right. Well, Noah, have a good night. Say hi to your family for us, and thanks for being on.
Thank you, guys.
Later.